let's go ahead and get started. We have a nice sized crowd today, so I want to make sure we save enough room for questions at the end. Welcome everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Elizabeth Toops. I'm the Bay Work Manager, and it's great to see everybody here for this exciting conversation about effective conversations. And I'm sure this is something that a lot of us deal with, no matter what our role is ensuring that we're communicating in a way that gets the point across and achieves the outcome that we want. Want to introduce Karoline Terrazas from Union Sanitary to lead us through this conversation. Thank you so much, Karoline, for your work with Bay Work, not only leading this discussion today, but you've been a real thought leader at Bay Work around the role of women in the trades. So we thank you for your leadership there. Again, for those of you who are just joining us, please introduce yourself by adding your name, your agency, and your title into the chat. Take it away, Karoline.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Very happy to be here. And I understand we have quite a few attendees today. I was seeing some of the agencies and titles come in. So from operators to engineers and chemists. And I'm very excited that you're investing an hour with me today when I know we could have so many wonderful things on our plate and bandwidth. I usually prefer introductions and ice breaking and group discussions, but I understand in this platform we're a little bit limited. And we also have just about 50 minutes together to go through some of this content. So I'll do the best that I can to engage with this group. I will say today I'm probably more of a facilitator than a teacher. I'm going to put all the heavy lifting on Fred Kaufman, and I'll explain to you who that is in just a moment. But like Elizabeth said, my name is Karoline Terrazas, and I am let's see if I can advance my slide. Maybe I just do it right here. There we go. I am the organizational performance manager over here at Union Sanitary District. So I'm in Union City and we're a wastewater treatment plant. I've been here about 7 years and we're a lean organization. So we wear many hats. So I have the safety hat, the emergency response hat, quality improvement, continuous improvement, performance metrics, you name it, I do it, SOP, technical writing, all types of fun stuff. But I've also taught or trained for over 20 years, even in my previous career, and that's something I'm most passionate about. So one of the things I love to do here at Union Sanitary District is really to manage our training schedule, but more so facilitate our leadership development program. And like Elizabeth mentioned, I also have the great privilege and honor to be able to work with the Women in Trades Committee of Bay Work and really try to push some initiatives there. So I'll talk a little bit more about that at the end. Hopefully you've been able to attend some of the other topics. I know some of them could be more technical in nature. I tend to focus more on soft skill and leadership skills and competencies. And I think we could probably all agree today's topic, effective conversations, is really a fundamental competency in the professional world, but also personal. And I think a lot of what I try to teach or share more than anything, because I didn't, this is not my method that I came up with. I like to borrow and get the word out to everybody because there's so many different approaches out there. But for me, it's if you can grow yourself personally in your personal environment, that will spill over to professionally and vice versa. And so, of course, communication is one of those things that continues to come up. And I think for many of us, we're always trying to figure out what's that gem, what's that new approach or new strategy that can help me become just a little bit better. And that for me would be, the biggest takeaway is to have you walk away with some little gem out of our time together today. So let me go ahead and talk about just what I call the classroom paycheck, right? You're investing your time with me today. I'll take just a couple of minutes to talk about difficult and crucial conversations and maybe get some of your feedback on, is it a mindset? If we approach it differently, are they easier to have? But like I also said, then I'm going to introduce my co-facilitator, who's Fred Kaufman from his Lean In organization. He has a lot of work with LinkedIn and has a lot of great leadership topics. And he has a wonderful approach on difficult conversations, and we wrap it all up together. We'll have a very quick self-assessment that I know will be in the documents for you to download. It's a simple Word document. You don't even really need to pull it out and fill it out unless you want to. And I'm also sharing the PowerPoint today because, again, I want to source a lot of this approach. This content comes from Fred Kaufman himself. So this is something that if you love what you learned today, you can easily take and facilitate the same conversation back at your organization. And so of course, there's always something, what do we take away? What are we investing in? And I want to make sure that everybody has a chance to share some strategies and you walk away with a plan. Maybe there's one or two things that you want to get stronger at when it comes to effective conversations. So that will be the goal at the very end of our presentation today. So let's see here. Well, let me go back actually one moment. And here in that first bullet, I talk about, we always hear the term difficult conversations or crucial conversations. And I know we could have a very long conversation of why they're important, but I think for all of us being here today, we must already understand that, communicating is the fundamental in the workplace. And there's so many different things. There's behavioral styles and communication styles and leadership styles that all impact how we approach people and our conversations. And of course, there's even other agencies out there that support what we do from, LCW that teach you really the technical way when you're dealing with performance reviews and, and your P's and Q's and all that fun stuff. But, one of the things that comes up with me a lot is, do any of us really approach a conversation to hope that we have a bad experience? Right? A lot of us want to say, okay, the goal of this is to leave this conversation and whether there's a compromise or there's a positive outcome. I don't think any of us ever really goes into a conversation hoping that it leaves things more difficult than they were than when you go into. And so a lot of it to me comes from being able to relate and having confidence and really the mindset around it. So just hearing the word a difficult conversation for some of us, that already has a negative connotation to that, right? It's going to be difficult. It's going to be hard. I have to address a performance expectation. I have to address, something that might be too personal. I have to address tardiness, or I have to address something that my employee did wrong. But I try to relate this. Many of us in our group here are parents. You think about some of us could be spouses. We could be bosses. We could have employees that report to us. We have colleagues. We're family members and friends. And if we think about our interactions, especially ones that are difficult, we tend to overthink them sometimes, or in some cases under-prepare. So whether you call it whatever flavor it is, whether you call it difficult or crucial, it really does come down to mindset. So if you can maybe reframe your thinking and looking at one of the latest approaches that I've been hearing out there in the training world, and if you Google it, you'll see a lot on it, is they're now called confident. And it's funny when I say that, I even try to sit up a little bit, stronger, and confident, or today effective, right? So already our mindset changes in that approach. And that's really where I, for this group and you sitting with me today, confidence comes a lot with preparation. So you want to ask yourself, what is it that I want to express in this conversation? What is it that I want to ask? And how can I relate to the person? And so in just a moment here, I'll share with you a video where we go through that process. And one of the most critical components to communication is not so much delivering, the facts and the data. That of course is all part of that process, but being able to relate, right? And so Fred Kaufman is going to help us with that. So let me go ahead and advance the slide. For those of you, hopefully, I don't know if many of you, I can't see if you can raise your hand or not, but I was curious how many of you have heard of Fred Kaufman. Feel free to put a note in the chat or raise your hand. Fred Kaufman is an executive coach and advisor on leadership and culture. He has a PhD in economics with University of California, Berkeley. And he has his own global consulting company and has done leadership training for over 15,000 executives around the world. So if you haven't heard from him, I would definitely encourage you to look up his information. He has lots of great little tidbits for training. But he's also held vice president positions at Google and also LinkedIn under the learning and development umbrella. So without further ado, I want to play, this is a 9-minute video as he walks you through the concept of contact, context, and content, as well as the I, we, it domains. And so after this, we'll take our own assessment and we'll discuss some of the strategies. So let me go ahead and start that.
It is precisely at those times that communication is most vital to achieve your goals, that conversations break down most dramatically. That's why difficult conversations are scary. The stakes are high. There's a high cost to fail. And yet, that's when failure is most likely. Have you ever had a bad conversation?
Yes.
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 Yes. Are you afraid you might have a bad conversation tomorrow or this week? Okay. We all have bad conversations, and we're all worried that these bad conversations will continue. So if we can step confidently into these conversations knowing that we can manage the process, then a whole new world opens up. If I push and I say, you're wrong, what do you want to do?
You're wrong.
And what do you think I want to do?
Push back.
Exactly. You're wrong.
No, you're wrong.
Okay. So now we escalate. Everyone's spending a lot of energy, and where are we going?
Nowhere.
Nowhere.
We're pushing with our hands, and we're pushing with our words. And each one of us trying to push the other person out by saying, I am right, and you're wrong. And if you follow the rule, when someone pushes, push back, you're always going to end up stuck. So we need to change this. But now when you push, I'm not going to push back. And when you say you're wrong,
You're wrong.
I'm going to yield and say, well, show me, what do you see that I don't? You know, I'm from Argentina, so what does this look like?
Tango.
I'm going to turn this into a dance. I mean, she thinks she's right. And she's seeing something I don't because I think I'm right. So the first step in this conversation is for me to look genuinely and say, oh, that's what you're seeing. I couldn't see it because it was behind me. Now she's going to give me permission to say, can I show you what I see that you haven't seen before? So let me show you. And here, now I'm going to turn a little more. You see, this was behind you and you couldn't see it. You want three things out of a conversation. You want to feel good about yourself. You want to relate to the other person positively. And you want to achieve your goals. Get something done, solve a problem. We're going to call these three domains the I, the we, and the it. I is how I feel inside. I want to be proud of myself. I want to feel good. We is how you and I relate. Openly, respectfully, kindly. And it is, well, how are we going to solve our problems? How are we going to get the results that we seek? I would like you to be less sure of yourself when you walk in, saying, well, I see part of the world, but I don't know what they're seeing. And from their perspective, what they see is right. And unless I recognize that they see something that makes sense to them, we can't communicate. If we're not in contact, and the only contact is a clash, we'll never get to the topic. But normally, I jump to content, and I imagine you do the same. We just want to deal with the problem, and we forget that how the person feels and how we relate is primary. Contact, context, and content. Don't jump into content before you make contact with the other person. There's a saying, I don't care how much you know until I know how much you care. You have to show the other person you care before they will listen to what you know. When you do this well, it just seems so natural, so easy, so common sense, that the other person will say, well, we just had a great conversation. It was really sweet, it was nice, and we solved the problem, and they will never know you're using anything. It's just being you, but better. There are things you can control and things you cannot control. You cannot control the outcome, but you can control the process. So let's look at what tools you can use to make sure you do your best in the I, the we, and the it.
For our engineering team as we grow.
The first tool is listening. Listening well, it's hard. It requires listening to the other person fully, which starts with not interrupting them. You have to pay attention and be quiet. This is especially hard when he is saying something that really irritates you. Your natural reaction will be to stop him. Well, that's the moment of truth. That's the moment when you stop yourself. You stay quiet and you pay attention because you're really trying to understand where he is coming from. What would you like to have happen?
So I would love for her to actually
The
feel
second
more
tool is inquiry, asking questions. What do you think? Why do you think what you think? And what would you like, given that you think that? After you listen, you have to let the other person know that you heard what they said. Well, let me make sure I understand. You're thinking about promoting her, and she's thinking she's going to get fired.
Exactly. So there's this.
So you summarize what he said and ask him, did I get what you wanted to tell me?
And I've tried to reassure her.
It may be that by summarizing what he said, he realizes now he didn't say something important to him, so he'll add it. This is a way for you to allow the other person, your counterpart, to share his deepest truth with you. That's a great thing to want. And it's totally out of my control. I can't help you through that. The next step of the conversation is to validate. You have to acknowledge that what they say is reasonable. You might be screaming inside, this is crazy. And maybe it's crazy for you, but I guarantee it's not crazy for him. That's why he's saying it. So let me try something. I'd like to. Now comes the crucial part, is to express your view safely. There's safety in I. When you speak in first person, you're not imposing your view on the other person. You're simply telling them what you think or what you feel. Notice the difference between you don't know what you're talking about and I don't understand what you're saying. Here's a suggestion. What if we... The next step of the conversation is to actually engage in a negotiation. You want to resolve the problem together. See, most people think of negotiation, how do I get what I want? I want to lower the price, I'll push you and you'll sell it to me for less, or I'm going to sell it to you for more. But this is really a negotiation. We're negotiating, how can we make this safe for both of us? Right. The last step of a constructive conversation is to formalize the agreement into a series of commitments. It's very different to agree than to promise. Another typical thing that happens in conversation is we're so happy we agreed. Then I say, great. Now we walk away. Yeah, we agreed, but nobody knows what's going to happen next. So the last step of every conversation is always, what are we going to do next? Let's make a commitment. And there's no commitment without time. So I said, by when? Can you prepare? Will we do this? Tomorrow, we'll meet in my office, we'll make this plan. So it's very clear, but it's not just a next step. It's a next step that we agreed and we both commit to. At the end of the conversation, you can do a process check to evaluate how did it go, and is there anything you can learn to make it better next time. The three areas to check are the I, the we, and the it. Do you feel good? Does your counterpart feel good? Have you related positively? Have you gotten what you want? Has she gotten what she wants? So what conversation are you afraid to have? And what can you do about it? Let me make a suggestion. First, connect with yourself. Ask yourself, what do I really want? What do I want to express? What do I want to ask? How do I want to relate to this other person? Then practice it, so you can stay connected to yourself when the conversation heats up. And then step into it.
All right, so we're back from the video. What do you guys think about that? What do you guys think about Fred Kaufman's approach to difficult conversations? Any immediate comments?
Nice. Good information.
Thank you. Anything else? You could throw it in the chat. I think Elizabeth and Robert are monitoring that for me. can I get in there? Can I see that? And Mike.
Yeah, there's just some good comments about changing in the perspective from you to I.
Yeah.
Um,
Making it safer. Well, and
And,
one of the things that
Liking
I,
the dance analogy.
yeah, the Argentinian, the movie. Actually, I'm very visual too, and he's right. A lot of times when you're approached with a problem, especially when you're not prepared, and I think that's the hardest part. And there can be training on that too, as far as leading, finding a better time, having an opportunity to prepare. But a lot of times it's this kind of concept where you both have these viewpoints, but if we don't take the time to relate and let that person be heard and not seeing what they're, he does that whole visual where he turns. And I think that's pretty powerful. A lot of times in our day-to-day, we're just so focused on getting to the problem and finding a solution that we might miss some of that. And so, like I mentioned earlier, some of the notes that I like most from him is, sometimes we jump too quickly into content, right? Let's solve the problem versus taking the time to address the emotional needs. And I know for some of us, right, a lot of us feel, oh gosh, this must be touchy-feely and everything's emotion. And we do hear a lot in these conversations that, take emotion out of it, be very logic, be very factual. I know from an HR approach, make sure you have all your data and, and all your examples and all that. And that's important. That's preparation. You want to be able to go in with examples and share, that's really your perspective and what you see. But if you don't take the time to allow that person to even just offload, how they're feeling or what's on their mind or what they see, then you could be missing something completely and they don't feel heard. And that's a big component of being effective when you communicate with others. All right, so we're going to jump in real quick. There is a Word document. I think we called it the seven areas, which goes through these tools that Fred Kaufman shared with us. And you can download the Word document. You can fill it in if you'd like. There's also the space of where you can write your strategies. So if you want that for notes, but honestly, I'm going to actually advance one more slide here. They're listed here. Okay. And so we'll just take 2 minutes and this should go really, really quick. Don't overthink it, right? I tend to do that. But just take a moment to assess your effectiveness when it comes to conversations. Here are the 7 areas on your handout. Take a few moments to rate each from 1 to 5. So 1 being sort of I'm least effective. When I think about the conversation or these tools as a whole, which of these areas am I really, really strong in? Which ones do I know? I'm a good listener, but maybe I'm a little bit less effective here. And go ahead and rate those all the way through all 7 sections. We'll take a moment to do that. As you do that, I'm going to give everybody sort of a challenge or a homework assignment. I guess I should have told you too, the premise is think about maybe a recent difficult conversation you've had at work. So I apologize if I didn't give that premise first, but the challenge for you after today and all this fun stuff, try to apply this your listening, rate your communication on these 7 tools or areas, from in your personal perspective. And you would be surprised how that might differ than when at work. In our professional setting, we might feel we are a little bit more effective in these or less at home. And I'll give you my example. I'm a parent of a 13-year-old. And when I went through this exercise and I applied it to my personal, they are different. I'm stronger in certain areas when I'm at work than I am with my teenager. And I've been really, really focusing on the listening with him and then summarizing. That's my area of need. But go ahead and rate yourself, and then we'll talk about some strategies. So I'll give you just about 30 more seconds unless we need more time. I think if I did this right, I should be able to open that up. I'm going to have to reshare this document.
I put the document into the chat too, Caroline.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And again, if you don't have it downloaded or printed, it's not a big deal. I think we can easily scan these 7 and sort of capture a few that we feel, God, I'm not as effective in that part of the conversation. Okay, do we need any more time, or are we ready to rock and roll and talk about some strategies? It's always quiet in this platform. Usually,
Well, we can allow a little more time. I'm just going to read a few of the comments that were made in case you didn't see them, Caroline, and then
great.
and others didn't see them, and that can give them a little bit more time. And when
Wonderful.
you asked what did they like about the video, and say, so I'm just going to read through that a little bit. Good insights, great change in perspective, changing from you to I. That was great, made a lot of sense. I like the dance features. Seems like a good approach to avoid being combative. Make contact before moving to content. Good ideas for work and home. Combative. And what I like is bringing it back to a commitment at the end. Oftentimes we get to agreement or consensus, and then nothing happens to affect a positive change. That's about it.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. Well, and that's so true as well, especially, let's say it's a difficult performance conversation. You know, in general, you want to have some sort of follow-up because maybe there is an improvement. But absolutely, thank you for that. All right, so this is the point. If I was in a room with all your beautiful faces and gorgeous eyes, I'd have you in different table groups and talking amongst each other. And also for time purposes, we're not doing a bunch of breakouts today. So this is going to be an opportunity for you to share. You can certainly jump off mute and chime in, or also go ahead and add to the chat. But what we're going to do now is sort of we're starting that takeaway process, you know, based on these 7 areas. You know, we've really just given you the approach from Fred Kaufman. We want you to pick, or I would like you to pick 1 to 2 of your lowest scoring areas. And that could be your area of improvement. I am a firm believer that if there's too much for us to want to focus on, it gets difficult to do. And if you could just take the time to focus maybe on one thing at first until you feel like you've mastered it or become more comfortable, then do the next. But if you put too many things on there, it can get very overwhelming. So I would say pick 1 or 2 areas at the most, and you can write it there if you want in the area of improvement. So this is where some of you can be rock stars, right? I'm sure in this group, some of you have scored yourself 5 or 4 or 5 in a lot of these areas. And so I'll go through some of the strategies that were shared and add some extras, but I really encourage those that scored high in each of these different areas to share something that you do that you feel is effective. You know, why, you know, if you scored high as for listening, what is it that you've done? Was there a training? What is an approach that you take that makes you such an effective listener? Because your strategy could possibly help someone else here that's trying to improve in that area. Okay. So I am watching our time. We will get through all 7 of these. So let's look at listen. And I know we have Robert and Elizabeth watching the chat box. But one of the first areas, of course, in effective conversation is listening, or difficult conversation. So listen quietly with no interruptions. I think Fred talks about staying quiet and paying attention and trying to understand. So those are all different strategies. What about those that scored high in this area? What are some of your approaches to being a strong listener, an active listener?
This is Dawn Benson. And for an active listener, it's good eye contact and focusing on the individual sharing the information and not distracted.
I'm writing these strategies down too.
Because there's nothing more. I know a lot of people are trying to formulate a response before they're actually listening to people, only because I've done that myself.
it's almost human nature, and that you hit it right there on the nail. A lot of us are already thinking of how they want to respond to maybe just a little piece that you've received. And you're absolutely right. I love those. So good eye contact, right? And that's showing, eliminating the distractions, maybe even look at your environment. Are you in an environment where you could be listening? Do you have technology in front of you? Are you in someone's office that's behind a computer? Think about, putting yourself in their shoes. And absolutely, those are great, Dawn. Thank you so much. I think it's normal for us to start. Some of us, it's human nature to want to fix or address, or we've heard it before. We know what they're talking about, and we want to jump right in. So, thank you. Were there any in the chat for listening before I move on?
Yeah, I put EQ.
Oh, yes.
For me, it starts with just emotional control, emotional, controlling my own emotions, and then trying to be sensitive to others. That, for me, that's where it starts, where the listening triggers.
Yes. Yes. And just emotional intelligence is very fundamental, right? It's being able to relate to people and to connect the emotional component, and feeling heard, or, being listened to, being able to control all those components. So yes, thank you.
And understanding your own emotions.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Okay. So we'll move on to the next one. So this is something I feel I'm pretty strong in, asking questions. Inquire openly with curiosity, from a place of being genuine is something I throw in there. It says trying to understand why your counterpart thinks what they're thinking. Try to get to that root. And so what are you thinking? Why do you think it? What would you like given that you think that? What is it that you want because you think of this way? That's a tongue twister. And then ask questions to get people from their emotional to logical brain, right? So you are trying to ask a lot of questions to uncover information. But who else? Anybody else that scored high in this area? Do you have any strategies on making sure that you're asking enough questions? It's very difficult when you're when you're talking with someone, usually in their very first, unless there's someone like me that overshares and everything they share, there's usually something, it's layers and there's more information backing behind it, especially if you are not understanding, right? Are there any other strategies this group would share for that? We have a quiet group. Well, I guess.
Well, I will add curiosity, just being curious about the other person's thoughts, feelings, experiences, and you use it as an opportunity to learn something that maybe you didn't see. Kind of like he said, they're showing you something that you didn't see. So I think if we have a curious spirit about it, it can cause us to ask questions.
Yeah, I would totally agree with Robert. And I think that's something that is sometimes hard for us because we approach a conversation with maybe some predetermined ideas or opinions, and we're eager to kind of formulate a conversation around what we already know or what we think we already know. And I also think that there's asking questions during the conversation, like, do I need more information, or what additional information would be helpful during the conversation? And then also at the end of the conversation, after summarizing, finding out if there are additional pieces of information that would be helpful to moving this process forward or to fulfilling whatever we've agreed to.
Yeah, no, that great comments there. I was going to say summarize, which is next, and we'll talk about that.
Someone said, excuse me, Caroline, that asking goes hand in hand with listening. Can't ask meaningful questions if you don't listen.
That's good. What and why? What and why? Try to understand what it is that they're thinking and why they're thinking that way.
And then someone else said asking open-ended questions too.
There you go. Right, because open-ended is going to get that person to share more versus just yes, no's, or very one-worded responses. No, open-ended questions are great. Absolutely, and it could lead to more questions and more details. Also, that listening and that silence is kind of, if you can marry those two together, like Elizabeth was stating, the more that you listen or the quiet, more someone will share. And that's a whole other training. But I want to get back to the comment, and we'll move on to summarize. I'm watching our time. What's so powerful about this, and this was an area I will, this is an area that I'm not strong in, but I will tell you, since I've gone through this sort of process, that is the one thing in my professional conversations I've been focusing on, especially when I work with my executive team, right? And with summarizing, what's so powerful about that is, I want to touch on what Elizabeth was saying, is that what you're doing is you're saying, this is what I heard. Did I get what you wanted to tell me? And that lets that person, as Fred said, speak their truth. So they're going to add more if they feel like, no, you didn't get it. And maybe they didn't articulate it, or maybe you didn't ask the right questions. And what that does is it opens up that conversation and allows you to go back to asking more questions. And it gives you an opportunity again to sit back and listen. So it kind of creates that cycle. And then honestly, one thing I've learned is that there's no harm in summarizing multiple times. Anytime you get more data that moves you through, or more information that moves you through the conversation, go ahead and re-summarize it. Make sure that you guys are still always on that same path. And did anybody have any comments about summarizing that they wanted to share?
Well, someone said developing trust, and maybe that's ties into that a little bit. If they can trust that you're listening,
Yes.
by the fact that you were able to understand and summarize what they said, that may cause them to trust you.
Absolutely. That's great. Okay, we will move on to validate, right?
I need help with this one right here, y'all. So somebody help me out here on this one here. Somebody.
Okay, Robert needs help on validate. So acknowledge what they say. Oh yeah, this one's a tough one. That could be reasonable, even if you disagree. Crazy for you, but not for them, right? It's kind of like their story's their story, their truth is their truth, right? The important thing about validation is, doesn't mean that you agree, right? You can validate, you can acknowledge. So who in this group does this really well? What's the language that you use?
Help me out, somebody, help me.
This is Dawn. I have conversations with a family member about politics all the time. And as we go down the rabbit hole, before going down to the rabbit hole, I always validate. I really hear your points. I really hear you, whether I agree with them or not, but let's talk about that. Yeah. And I always do my fingers in an ellipsis in the middle. So I'm trying to get to the middle.
Oh.
So I want to understand why you think that way. I'm just curious. And share with me. So those are some of the things. So you don't, so especially when you don't agree with somebody, you're like, what? Yeah. Or that face that goes like, huh? Are you crazy?
You gotta have to watch your facial expressions.
Oh, and that's true. You have to watch. Yeah. And you have to look. Yeah. And if you're not, fake it until you make it.
Well, I do like that you use the political example. That, it's very difficult. I'm not going to go down a rabbit hole with this, or even faith-based, right? And everybody does have their opinion and does have what they think is their truth. And to me, validation is also a matter of respect, right? If you're going into conversation, what's the point of listening, asking questions, even summarizing what you heard, if you're just going to jump in and still say, no, it's got to be this way, right? Not even taking the time to say, okay, I appreciate that. And I love, and I'm going to steal that, Dawn. I really hear your points, right? Again, I listened to you. This is what I understood from that. That's great. Anybody else have anything you want to add? All right, we're going to get down to the last three. I promise we're going to get through this before we're out of time. See how quick this goes by? Express yourself, right? Share your truth, your assessment of the situation. So again, if I think about some of those difficult conversations we have to have in the workplace, this is usually where you hear, you know, where are your examples? Where can you tie in the information, the logic that you have that could help them sort of think through that process. Now you've put that out there. And the most important piece here, when you express, you want it to be safe. And that's where I think someone wrote in the chat earlier, that concept of saying you, instead of saying you, change it to I, you know, speak in the first person with the I statement. And then you telling them what you think and feel. So now it's really, again, there's that dance. Now it's like, okay, where he did the visual, I'm very visual. Okay, I let you look and I'm seeing what you're seeing, but the path is still going this way. There's another turn. What do you think about this perspective or this information, right? So it's allowing your turn to express yourself. Anybody have, he gives the example of you don't know what, like, instead of saying you don't know what you're talking about, saying something like, I don't understand what you're saying, right? So again, just further articulating versus making them, you know, you, turning it back to I. Does anybody else have an example, someone that's really strong in this that they'd want to share? I think you did a good job explaining that one.
One thing I find, and this may be age related, I don't know, but sometimes what I find is that I'm having a conversation that involves, you know, a lot of different elements, and I'll catch 1, 2, and 3, and 5, but I missed 4. And it was maybe because I was still focused on 1, 2, and 3, or, and so sometimes what I find helpful is to go back and say, hey, you know what, I'm gonna need, you know, I need your help to kind of review that number 4 element again, just to make sure I'm capturing everything that you're trying to say. Here's what I heard from 1, 2, and 3, and 5. Can you just help me connect with number 4, and just sort of, you know, acknowledging that you know, we may have missed information that might be, you know, critical to the conversation, and I think that's helpful on a lot of different levels.
Absolutely. And that's the reality of conversations, right? They can be complex. They can have a lot of moving parts, or you think you're going into one discussion and certain other things start surfacing. And I'll throw myself under a bus. I could be a squirrel. I could just be like, what's the next thing, you know, or moving too fast. And Elizabeth, you had some really great, your verbiage focused a lot on the I statement. So thank you for that. All right, we're going to move on to negotiate, right? And this one's an interesting one, right? Engage creatively and try to find a solution that addresses everyone's concerns. It's not always going to solve a problem. I think that's one thing to walk away with, right? You might have one conversation and maybe you're negotiating whether it's more time, or, you know, maybe we need to have a different sort of meeting or a different planning meeting. But at least with the concerns heard, it's more like, okay, how do we approach how we both can connect together and find our common next steps? And I know that would be commit in the next one, but, you know, how do we make this safe for both of us? How can we get on a path that would work where we both feel that we can address this and move forward, or resolve the problem together, right? Negotiating. Anybody a negotiator in here? Anybody really strong at this, or have any good verbiage that you would use to bring into a conversation? This could be that we domain, right? We want to feel good outside of this. We want to work on this together.
Well, for me, one thing is key to be selfless, and not selfish, and just to, you know, want best for others more than for yourself, as a principle that I employ here.
Yes. I like that. Selfless and best for others. Well, it goes back to too, I mean, we don't ever want to none of us go into a conversation wanting to have a bad outcome, right? We don't intend to say, I want to go talk to Shirley today and make sure that we're both miserable afterwards, right? We're always trying to get to some sort of positive outcome or agreement, whatever that might be. So thanks for that, Robert. And the last one, I'm watching our time, is commit, right? So formalize your agreement. It could be a series. Fred Kaufman says that any type of commitment or goals has time associated with it. Make a clear plan. And it's different to agree than the promise, right? If I agree that I would like to have more conversations with you about this, or, whatever it might be, versus, I promise I'll get better, that type of thing. Anybody in here that scored themselves pretty high at sort of ending an effective conversation with some commitment language or strategies that you could share with us? You can put it in the chat. I know there's some good ones in there. You can say things like, how about our next step be this, right? And how about we connect again next week so we can talk a little bit more about your ideas for this process improvement. That would be one way for that. You're formalizing an agreement. Your commitment is a formalized agreement. We agree to move forward, and this is sort of how we're going to do that. All right. Are there any last comments about those strategies before I jumped back into my PowerPoint? It's a pretty simple gig, huh? Let me go ahead and where's my share screen? Okay. Let's get back into the PowerPoint. Share that. And I'm on the last couple of slides. Hopefully everybody can see that. Okay. All right. So we're down to the last few minutes here. So of course, my big thing is, your takeaway. What can you do from our conversation together? I encourage you, if you really like the video, that it's in the PowerPoint, it's embedded in there. You can certainly search up Fred and find a lot of his other content. So if ever you want to share this with someone that you think could benefit, please do. But hopefully you found a little gem in our conversation today. I encourage you to, again, select one or two of those tools and apply some of the strategies and the verbiage or the things that we discussed that you can focus on so you can get stronger. And then don't forget that mindset component. You do want to prepare for that conversation. What do you want? What do you want them to feel? What do you want the outcome to be? What are the things you want to ask? And if you can really prepare, you'll have some of those already in play before the conversation even starts, and already go in a more confident way to have an effective conversation. And the last thing, just as a reminder, difficult conversations are going to be difficult. Some of them will work out well, and some of them will not work out well, right? And it's about Fred Kaufman's approach is a process. So something that I do with everything, even after our training today, is I'll say, okay, Karoline, how do you think that went? And what can I do better next time? And I do that in all my conversations, whether they're difficult or not, or all my trainings. And I think that's a good, someone being a quality process person here at my role, that's a good practice to have every time you have a conversation, even if the outcome is fabulous and it turns out very positive. You can say, wow, how did that go? I feel this way. Can it be better? What was so great about that? So again, I encourage you to apply those strategies and do those process checks. And my very last slide here, I will open up to a few questions, but I wanted to say thank you so much. I know on this platform it gets a little bit different, but I appreciate you investing your time in me and learning a new approach to effective conversations. Again, my name is Karoline Terrazas. You can certainly contact me. I put my email and my phone number there if you have any questions. I also am on the Women in the Trades Committee, and we meet I gotta do my plug, every third Tuesday at 3 p.m. And I encourage anybody to join us and help us with our initiatives as we really focus on, the women in the trades and in the water and what we do, and even things from soft skills to technical skills. But that's it. I was going to be quiet now and see if there are any questions or any other comments in the chat box. Let me see here. I think I can open up. Thank you, Elliot. Anything else? Tips for positive communication?
And please give us feedback on this session today. The link is in the chat. There, it's a SurveyMonkey link. It'll take you less than 5 minutes to fill out the survey. And thank you to Karoline. I also put into the chat, by the way, the Baywork website as well. Give us check that out. See what else is going on that Baywork is sponsoring, including the women in the trades. There's a whole page on the website dedicated to women in the trades. One of the things that the Women in the Trades has done in the last year is a mentorship event, and I certainly think mentorship is a great resource for learning more and developing professional skills around effective conversations. So that might be another idea for people to pursue through their agency.
Well, I think that's it, unless there's any more questions. Thank you. I appreciate everybody's time.